In December 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, Private First Class Edward Collins of the 101st Airborne Division was reported missing in action after becoming separated from his unit in the Ardennes Forest. The official U.S. Army report concluded he was ambushed, presumed killed in action, with his body never recovered. His family received a condolence letter and a folded flag. 65 years later, in 2009, a group of hikers in Luxembourg Province, Belgium, discovered a rotting wooden bunker half buried in damp soil. Inside was a Thompson M1, a submachine gun, still bearing Collins' engraved serial number, along with a set of weathered requisition slips. Belgian federal police immediately sealed off the site, transferring the artifacts for forensic analysis and cross-referencing with military databases. The results confirmed the Thompson matched the serial number issued to Edward Collins in November 1944. The information was sent to the U.S. for the Defense POW, divided by MIA Accounting Agency, DPAA, responsible for World War II missing in action cases. Collins' file was reopened after more than 6 decades. Among the recovered slips, one sealed document was clearly dated the 22nd of December 1944, 3 days after the official record listed his death on the 19th of December 1944. This temporal discrepancy was immediately flagged for investigation. The DPAA contacted direct relatives. The call was received by Daniel Collins, Edward's grandson, a former military investigator who had worked in battlefield crime units. He was informed that the discovered artifacts perfectly matched Edward Collins' weapon records. A preliminary Belgian report noted, the gun was unusually well preserved, showing no signs of firing damage, and the accompanying documents related to fuel and ammunition transport. Daniel Collins received the initial case file. A paratrooper recorded missing in the Ardennes in December 1944, a Thompson with an engraved serial number, and documents showing inconsistent dates. The case was officially classified as requiring further investigation. On the 14th of October, 2009, just 3 weeks after Belgian police reported the bunker discovery, Daniel Collins landed at Brussels Airport as the family representative and DPAA-authorized case investigator. He was immediately taken to the evidence room of the federal police in Namur, where the Thompson M1A1 and weathered documents were stored under controlled humidity. An initial forensic report from Belgium's Criminal Identification Institute concluded, the gun showed no combat damage, its barrel was clean, no recent firing marks, the safety was intact, and the wooden stock was coated with an old layer of preservative grease. These findings indicated the weapon was deliberately stored, not abandoned in battle. Experts also noted the gun's safety was secured with a small steel wire, a technique typically used for sealing stored weapons, not those carried by frontline soldiers. Among the moldy documents, 3 requisition slips were still legible. 2 related to 45 ACP ammunition, but the third drew particular attention. A fuel requisition voucher, GMC 2.5-ton truck with a faint red stamp reading U.S. Army Depot B-12. The stamp confirmed fuel issuance for a transport on the 22nd of December 1944, including the GMC truck's chassis number. Daniel requested an immediate cross-check with the DPAA's electronic database linked to the National Archives. Records showed Depot B-12 was listed as deactivated by late November 1944 after logistical repositioning to southern Belgium. Thus, on December 22, the depot no longer officially existed. The glaring inconsistency was that the bunker's requisition slip indicated Depot B-12 was still operational and issuing fuel after its recorded deactivation. Belgian police investigators noted in their report, the possibility of a covert depot or off-the-books operation must be considered. This was the first indication that these documents were not random remnants, but tied to a concealed logistical operation during the Battle of the Bulge. When Daniel interviewed the forensic team, another detail emerged. At the bottom of the fuel voucher was a signature in gray pencil, not standard ink or stamped mark. The signature consisted of just 2 letters, GF. The pencil mark was hasty, with no full name, suggesting an internal code. Document experts confirmed the handwriting did not match any officially recorded supply officers at Depot B-12. Daniel requested a comparison with other logistical records from the same period in the Ardennes. Results from the Dover Military Data Center revealed no supply officer with the initials GF was listed in December 1944 records. An archivist's note added that some damaged records had referenced an unofficial figure known as Gray Fox, but their identity was never established. This detail shifted the entire investigation. The Thompson was not merely a missing paratrooper's personal weapon. Its sealed storage in the bunker, alongside requisition slips, suggested Edward Collins was present at or uncovered an unauthorized fuel distribution operation tied to Depot B-12. The GF signature on the document pointed to a mysterious link in the supply chain, an individual or group using a code instead of a real name, which was entirely inconsistent with U.S. Army supply protocols of the time. In a report sent to Washington, D.C. that day, Daniel wrote, "The requisition slip dated 22 divided by 12 divided by 1944 contradicts the KIA record of 19 divided by 12 divided by 1944. Fuel issued from Depot B-12, which was already disbanded. The signature GF appears potentially linked to the codename Gray Fox in classified logistics records. Recommend expanding investigation." This marked the first official mention of Gray Fox in the Edward Collins case, stemming from a faded slip in a forgotten Ardennes bunker after 65 years. At the end of the day, Belgian police resealed the evidence in a double-locked safe, sending digital copies of the requisition slips to the U.S. The preliminary report was marked sensitive with a note. Evidence suggests an uncontrolled supply network during the Battle of the Bulge, requiring examination of potential ties to the disappearance of Private Edward Collins. The case was no longer just an MIA file, but an investigation into a shadowy figure or operation known as Gray Fox. The next day, Daniel visited the Belgian military archives, where digitized Allied battlefield records from the Ardennes were stored. He requested a review of the After-Action Report, AAR, for the company Edward Collins belonged to. The AAR, dated the 27th of December 1944, after intense fighting around Bastogne, included a personnel note. Private Edward Collins, seen alive 21 deck, sector south of Bastogne. This entry, in the original typed report, bore the company officer's signature. Thus, field reports confirmed Edward was seen alive at least until December 21. Daniel immediately cross-referenced this with the official KIA record sent to the family. That record, dated December 19, stated, "Edward Collins, presumed Kaya during German ambush, Ardennes Forest." According to the official file, Collins went missing and was presumed killed on December 19, 2 days before the AAR confirmed he was alive. This was not a simple error. The KIA report being dated 2 days earlier than direct personnel evidence suggested the death date was backdated to fit an ambush narrative. In military administrative terms, this indicated a backdated report. Daniel noted this discrepancy in his report to the DPAA. Discrepancy. Official KIA record 19/12. AAR entry confirms alive 21/12. Possible deliberate alteration of date of death. The date mismatch grew more significant alongside the bunker's requisition slip dated December 22. The timeline now formed a sequence. Kaya record on December 19, witness confirmation on December 21, fuel voucher on December 22. These 3 dates were entirely inconsistent, revealing a major gap in the official story. While reviewing evidence from the site, Daniel accessed evidence bag number 3, labeled Personal Effects. Inside was a decayed brown leather wallet, still containing some papers and photos. One of 2 small photos, though water-damaged, was identifiable. It showed a group of U.S. soldiers standing beside a GMC 2.5-ton truck loaded with jerrycan fuel containers. The soldier on the left, clearly Edward Collins, wore the 101st Airborne patch on his shoulder. On the back of the photo, faint pencil writing read, Deck 20 Bastogne Sector. Thus, the photo, taken on December 20, confirmed Collins was alive at least 1 day after his recorded Kia date and was present near a GMC truck carrying fuel. The photo's coincidence with the December 22 fuel voucher strengthened the connection. Collins had witnessed or participated in checking fuel shipments during the Bastogne siege. Daniel sent the photo for digital forensic analysis. Brussels imaging experts confirmed the pencil handwriting matched 1942 era pencils and Collins' known handwriting from family letters. They also verified the GMC truck was a 1943 model with U.S. Army transport markings, not a captured German vehicle. Notably, the truck's side number, when enlarged, matched the chassis number on the Depot B12 fuel voucher. This connection forms a concrete chain of evidence. The photo of Collins standing next to the GMC on December 20, the fuel requisition slip for that same truck on December 22, and the falsified Kaya record dated December 19. Thus, the story of Collins dying in an ambush on December 19 no longer holds. Instead, it is clear that Collins was active, until at least December 21, present in the Bastogne area, and somehow involved with an off-the-books fuel transport operation. During a meeting with Belgian police, Daniel presented these findings. The officers agreed that the appearance of the fuel voucher and the photo could not be coincidental. The Belgian prosecutor's representative noted, "It is possible that Private Collins witnessed illegal supply activities and was eliminated to prevent disclosure." The report was sent simultaneously to the DPAA and the U.S. Department of Defense. However, that same day, Daniel received a copied file from Washington with a note, "No further clarification required. Official Kaya remains 19 Dec 1944. The insistence on maintaining the original death date despite new evidence suggested an official effort to uphold the old narrative. This was the first indication that Edward Collins' file was not merely erroneous due to wartime chaos, but may have been deliberately altered to conceal a shady operation involving fuel and logistics. By day's end, Daniel compiled the evidence into 3 points. The AAR confirming Collins was alive on December 21, the presumed KIA record of December 19, and the photo of Collins next to the GMC on December 20. In his final note, he wrote, "The documents indicate the possibility that Private Collins was involved in an incident related to fuel logistics. The discrepancy in the death date is evidence that the record was altered. This marked a turning point, transforming Collins' case from a standard MIA into an investigation with clear signs of fraud within the Battle of the Bulge's logistics system." When the December 20 photo confirmed Edward Collins was alive and standing next to a GMC loaded with fuel cans, Daniel requested the transfer of all evidence to the Weapons Forensics Lab for further analysis. The Thompson M1. A1 was disassembled, from barrel to breech to stock. Technicians compared the barrel to 45 ACP casings found scattered near the wooden bunker. The results showed no casings bore rifling marks matching the Thompson. This meant Collins' weapon had not been fired in the battle where he was presumed killed. The barrel was clean, with no soot or heat distortion. Contrary to the assumption of abandoned in combat, the Thompson was stored like an inventory item, not a weapon used on the front lines. While cleaning the hardened grease around the wooden stock, a technician found a crumpled piece of wrapping paper stuck inside. After drying and examining it under ultraviolet light, faint printed text appeared. Property of Quartermaster Command. This was standard quartermaster weapon wrapping, used for transport or storage. It was not something a frontline soldier could easily access, let alone carry. So why was Collins' gun sealed with quartermaster paper when records claimed he went missing in combat? Daniel placed the paper next to the December 20 photo of Collins with the GMC and the December 22 fuel voucher. All pointed to one conclusion. Edward was directly linked to a supply operation, not just a combat paratrooper. He had witnessed or been drawn into an off-the-books logistics activity. The fuel voucher bore the GF signature. The photo placed Collins at the supply scene, and now the gun was sealed with quartermaster paper. This convergence could not be explained by the killed in ambush hypothesis. Tracing the 101st Airborne's weapon distribution records for December 1944, Daniel found an odd detail. Many guns and equipment were marked redistributed from the central depot without a receiving unit listed. Next to these entries was a pencil mark, the same 2 letters, GF. The signature matched the fuel voucher exactly. This repetition confirmed it was no coincidence. GF was the mark of someone with authority in the supply system, orchestrating fake vouchers and shipments absent from official maps. Piecing together the data, a picture emerged. Collins was pulled from the combat narrative into an entirely different context: logistics. He had witnessed an illegal transport operation, possibly attempted to report it, and thus became a target for elimination. His Thompson was seized, sealed as evidence to be erased, and buried in the bunker with the requisition slips. If he had died in combat, the gun would have been lost on the battlefield, bearing firing marks, or gone entirely. Instead, it was handled like incriminating evidence. Revisiting the December 19 KIA record, Daniel realized it was deliberately backdated to obscure subsequent events: the December 20 photo, the December 21 witness, the December 22 voucher. Now, the property of Quartermaster Command paper further confirmed that Edward Collins' story was not about an ambush but a covert logistics operation where a figure marked GF held authority. And that truth likely led to Collins' disappearance. In December 1944, the Ardennes Forest was the epicenter of Germany's last major counteroffensive. Dense forests, freezing weather, and limited visibility from fog and snow enabled the Wehrmacht's surprise attack. A critical German weakness was fuel. Panzer divisions, especially Kampfgruppe Piper's Spearhead, could only advance by capturing U.S. fuel depots. Battlefield reports noted German troops were ordered to prioritize seizing supply trucks and fuel caches, anything to keep Tiger and Panther tanks running. Conversely, Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne was entrenched, faced severe ammunition shortages. Command issued strict firing limits. Artillery was rationed to a few rounds daily, and rifles and machine guns received tightly controlled ammo allotments. Both sides craved the same resources, fuel and ammunition, turning logistics into a shadow battlefield. Amid this chaos, Germany's Operation Greif worsened rear-line confusion. German soldiers in U.S. uniforms, driving American jeeps, infiltrated roads, swapped signs, and altered passwords. U.S. military police constantly stopped vehicles, using baseball trivia or state capitol questions to verify identities. Misrouted supply units, misled by tampered signs, sometimes delivered ammo to dangerous areas or never reached the front. Logistics in the Ardennes in late December 1944 was a maze: scarce supplies, lax oversight, and ample opportunities for exploitation. Daniel closely examined the documents found in the bunker. Beyond the GF signed fuel voucher, the bundle included a yellowed quartered map with torn edges but clear pencil markings. On the 150,000 military map, a bold black arrow marked a route from Bastogne northward, crossing the corridor Kampfgruppe Piper had traversed days earlier. Next to the arrow, handwritten text read, "Fuel transfer route." This path did not match any official Allied supply routes. It was a separate line, parallel to approved transport paths, eerily aligning with areas where Germans were desperately hunting fuel. This detail raised a new suspicion. Was there a covert fuel transport route outside official quartermaster control run by a separate group? If so, it may not have solely supplied U.S. forces in Bastogne but could have facilitated covert exchanges with the enemy. Collins' presence in the December 20 photo next to a fuel-laden GMC, followed by his disappearance, could be tied to this route. Cross-referencing the map with operational records, Daniel noted Piper's advance to Stavelot-Stoumont during the same period. That was the exact area the fuel transfer route arrow crossed. Historically, Piper captured a fuel depot at Stavelot but couldn't transport all the fuel. The locational overlap fueled suspicion. The covert route may have passed through the fiercely contested fuel dispute zone. The accumulating clues: the voucher from the disbanded Depot B-12, the recurring GF signature, the Thompson sealed with quartermaster paper, and now the map with a fuel transfer route arrow through Piper's operational zone were no longer disparate. They formed a structure indicating a secret fuel transport network amid the Ardennes chaos. Edward Collins, somehow, was directly entangled in it. The Ardennes in December 1944 was not just a clash of firepower, but a covert war over fuel and ammo. In the maze of Operation Greif, clandestine routes could exist alongside official systems, concealed by swapped signs and forged vouchers. The bunker's map revealed that Edward Collins likely discovered such a route, and that was the true reason his Kia record was falsified from the start. Daniel left Belgium for the National Archives in Maryland to pursue the trail. There, he requested fuel and ammo requisition records for the 101st Airborne in December 1944, comparing them to the bunker's documents. Microfilm rolls were pulled from storage and loaded onto readers. Cross-referencing revealed GMC truck numbers, issuance dates, and fuel quantities matched the slips in his possession with uncanny precision, but deeper scrutiny exposed discrepancies. Multiple truck chassis numbers appeared repeatedly on the same day, as if one truck could make two separate deliveries simultaneously logical on paper, impossible in reality. He reviewed frontline receipt reports from the besieged Bastogne. Defensive unit logs recorded severely limited ammo and fuel, far less than what rear-line requisitions claimed. Many Depot B-12 shipments, fully documented, never appeared in frontline reports. This meant ghost shipments existed, recorded, stamped, but never delivered. The irregularities grew clearer. Over 3 consecutive days, December 22, 23, and 24, Daniel counted at least 5 requisitions for GMC shipments to Bastogne. Each listed large fuel and ammo quantities, yet frontline reports showed no deliveries. All bore the U.S. Army Depot B-12 stamp. The issue: Depot B-12, per official records, was disbanded in late November and relocated to France. On logistical maps, it no longer existed. Yet B-12 stamped vouchers continued during the Bulge's peak. Only one explanation remained. Depot B-12 operated as a covert hub, an off-the-books transfer point. It used official stamps and forms, but was unrecorded in the quartermaster system. A shadow depot ran parallel, serving a separate purpose. And in every voucher, the GF signature appeared in the approval section. Daniel enlarged a scanned voucher. The pencil mark stood out. A curved G, a right-leaning F, identical to the Belgian slip. The signer was the same individual, with access to quartermaster stamps and the ability to legitimize forged documents. The voucher quantities were significant. One from December 22 listed 2,000 gallons of fuel and 1,500 crates of .30 carbine ammo, enough to sustain a regiment's firepower. Yet, in reality, artillery rationed shots, and infantry shared bullet clips. This proved the documented supplies were diverted elsewhere. Combining the fuel transfer route map with these vouchers, Daniel saw a perfect fit. The map's route was the path these ghost shipments took. Collins held that map, meaning he knew of the covert route. And Depot B-12, supposedly closed, was the hub behind it. The story was no longer just about a discrepancy in a paratrooper's death date. It revealed a clear picture of an illegal transport network, concealed by quartermaster paperwork, with a fake depot set up to siphon supplies during the fiercest campaign. And Edward Collins, the soldier recorded missing on December 19, likely stumbled upon this truth in his final days. Daniel decided to broaden the investigation by contacting surviving veterans of the Ardennes campaign. Through the 101st Airborne Veterans Association, he was referred to Walter Briggs, a nearly 90-year-old former combat engineer who served near Bastogne in late December 1944. Briggs, long retired and living quietly in a small Pennsylvania town, shuddered slightly when Daniel mentioned Edward Collins, as if a decades-buried memory had resurfaced. They sat in Briggs' small living room, with Collins's file and photos spread across the table. Briggs picked up the photo, nodding slowly. "I remember him. Younger than me, paratrooper. But that night, I'll never forget." Daniel stayed silent, letting the old man continue. Briggs recounted that on the night of December 22, his engineer unit was ordered to rebuild a wooden warehouse on the forest's edge, used as a temporary transfer point. Snow fell heavily, the moon dim, and work was interrupted when a group of American soldiers arrived. They were escorting a man, hands tied behind his back, Briggs said. A flashlight beam caught him just enough for me to recognize Collins. He was still in his paratrooper uniform, covered in muddy snow, mouth gagged with cloth. The scene stunned Briggs. An American soldier tied up and led away by fellow Americans. Briggs and a few engineers exchanged glances but said nothing. He clearly recalled that moment because an officer with the group turned back, lowering his voice. "Keep quiet, Gray Fox wants silence." That name Gray Fox haunted Briggs for years, as he never saw Collins again after that night. The wooden warehouse was later abandoned and rotted in the forest. Hearing this, Daniel knew the site Briggs described was the same bunker where the Thompson and requisition slips were found in 2009. The witness's account perfectly aligned with the physical evidence. Daniel asked Briggs if the men restraining Collins could have been Germans disguised as Americans, as in Operation Greif. Briggs shook his head. "No way. I was close enough to see their uniforms, their patches clearly. They were Americans, our own guys." The officer, I don't recall his name, just his voice and the mention of Gray Fox. Briggs added that after that night, some in his engineer team whispered about odd noises from behind the warehouse, like a bunker door opening and wood being stacked. But no one dared investigate, as the area was sealed off by armed guards under the guise of securing the supply depot. The next morning, the engineers were reassigned elsewhere, never returning. Cross-referencing with National Archives findings, Daniel realized Briggs' account confirmed what he was pursuing. The fake Depot B-12 and its ghost shipments couldn't operate without direct American involvement, and Collins, rather than dying in a German ambush as recorded, was detained by his own comrades. Briggs's overhearing "Gray Fox wants silence" proved the name Gray Fox wasn't a later conjecture, but was mentioned in Ardennes in 1944 amid the firestorm nights. Briggs' story changed the case's nature. It was no longer a forgotten MIA case, but an internal elimination. A private had stumbled onto an illegal transport operation and became a liability to be removed. Those responsible weren't German agents or escaped prisoners, but American soldiers under an officer codenamed Gray Fox. Leaving Briggs' small house in Pennsylvania, Daniel knew he had the first living witness confirming Edward Collins didn't die in an ambush. The truth was far grimmer. He was bound and taken away by fellow soldiers in the freezing Ardennes night, then vanished forever. After leaving Briggs' home, Daniel returned to Brussels with a clear goal: verify the veteran's story with remaining supply records. If Collins was indeed taken by American soldiers on December 22, it was tied to the wooden bunker and secret shipments. Battlefield logs from Bastogne noted that from December 20 to 25, defending forces faced severe shortages. 105 mm artillery rounds, the backbone of the perimeter, were nearly depleted, with guns limited to a few shots daily. Infantry fared worse. 30 carbine ammo was so scarce that squads shared single clips, some reporting 10 rounds for the entire squad. These were dire figures, underscoring why history recalls Bastogne as a brutal battlefield. But Daniel didn't stop at frontline reports. He accessed logistics records from rear supply depots where convoys originated for Bastogne. Reviewing inventories, he was stunned by a stark contrast. Just 20 kilometers from Bastogne, an intermediate depot still held thousands of 105 mm shells and tens of thousands of carbine rounds during the same period Bastogne pleaded for supplies. On paper, these were logged as shipped out, yet frontline receipt reports showed no record of their arrival. Supplies vanished en route, mirroring the ghost trucks Daniel uncovered with the Depot B-12 fuel vouchers. Digging deeper, Daniel found a neglected ledger from a leaked 1,950 seconds file. It wasn't an official typed archive, but a handwritten quartermaster clerk's notebook. Pages detailed shipments, dates, ammo types, quantities, destinations. For December 21, 22, and 23, Daniel spotted an odd entry. Alongside shipments marked Bastogne, another line read, Route K47. Cross-referencing with Allied operational maps, Daniel found no route coded K47. It didn't exist in official transport systems. Yet, the ledger listed specific quantities for this route: 500 105 mm shells, 5,000 carbine rounds on December 22, plus smaller shipments in following days. If these reached Bastogne, the siege wouldn't have been so desperate. But none arrived. The only explanation, supplies, were diverted to a covert route off all operational maps. Daniel laid the ledger beside the bunker slips. The GF signature appeared in both, with the same slanted pencil strokes and elongated F. There was no doubt. The person approving Route K47 was behind the fake Depot B12, the figure known as Gray Fox. Briggs had heard the name when Collins was led away, and now the ledger confirmed Gray Fox ran a parallel transport system, siphoning ammo from Bastogne at its most critical moment. Each piece tightened the puzzle. Bastogne wasn't starved of ammo just because of cut routes or wartime chaos. It was deliberately deprived. While frontline soldiers scraped for bullets, thousands of shells and carbine rounds vanished from official records into an invisible Route K47. Collins knew this. He held the map marked Fuel Transfer Route, appeared in a photo beside a fuel-laden GMC, and was then bound and taken with the chilling words, "Gray Fox wants silence." From a missing paratrooper, the story revealed an internal elimination tied to a sophisticated logistics manipulation network. The Route K47 ledger wasn't a random detail, but clear evidence that during the Bulge, hands diverted critical supplies from where they were needed most for another purpose. And because Collins touched this truth, he was erased from history for 65 years. Daniel brought the ledger copies and all files back to Brussels for further cross-checking. Upon arriving at his hotel, he sensed something off. Twice, while turning through small streets near the city center, a black Peugeot kept its distance behind him. The next day, entering the National Library, the same car was parked across the street. The tailing was too obvious, and Daniel realized that since uncovering the Route K47 ledger, someone didn't want him digging deeper. One evening, opening his laptop to review National Archives scans, Daniel noticed it ran unusually slow. His antivirus flagged unauthorized remote access. Files recently downloaded from Washington showed signs of being accessed. He disconnected the network and took the drive to a Brussels cybersecurity lab. Tests revealed the laptop was infected with an advanced persistent threat malware, not a petty hacker's work but sophisticated spyware capable of remote data extraction and erasing traces. Soon after, Daniel received an anonymous email. Its message was brief: "Stop chasing Gray Fox." The send time coincided with the laptop breach. The warning wasn't a prank. It was carefully crafted, a single line, no extra characters. What caught Daniel's attention was the technical detail. Cybersecurity experts analyzing the email's metadata found its transmission didn't come from an anonymous proxy, but a server within the U.S. military's European infrastructure. This wasn't the work of a freelance hacker or cybercrime group, but bore traces of a military-authorized server. This discovery chilled Daniel. If the anonymous email came from military infrastructure, it meant the sender was directly connected to or had access to U.S. military resources. The Gray Fox he was pursuing wasn't just a historical shadow from the Bulge, but a name potent enough to prompt the current system to silence him. That evening, Daniel tested the waters. He sent a dummy email to a DPAA colleague, casually mentioning Route K47. Within 20 minutes, another anonymous email arrived. "You are crossing the line." Again, a single line, no signature, no trace, but the message clearly showed his communications were being monitored. He recalled Briggs's words, "Gray Fox wants silence." 65 years later, that order seemed still in effect. Someone with power and tools was tracking his every move. Daniel reported the incidents to Belgian federal police, but they only logged the case and warned him to protect himself. Matters tied to U.S. military infrastructure were beyond their jurisdiction. In his small hotel room, Daniel spread out the evidence. The December 20 photo of Collins by the GMC, fake requisition slips, the fuel transfer route map, the Route K47 ledger, and now anonymous emails from a military server. The chain of events pointed to one truth. Collins didn't die in an ambush but was eliminated by the system he served, and 65 years later, hands were still working to keep that story buried. But with the email metadata, Daniel had direct digital evidence for the first time. The threat didn't come from strangers, but from within the U.S. military's infrastructure. This was no longer just a historical investigation. It had reached the present, and the figure codenamed Gray Fox, or those inheriting his network, was still alive, still powerful, and still determined to maintain silence at all costs. Daniel realized he couldn't continue alone. After being tailed in Brussels, his laptop infected with spyware, and anonymous emails sent from a U.S. military server, He knew the case had grown far beyond a World War II missing person file. His only option was to take the investigation public, ensuring the evidence couldn't be buried if something happened to him. He contacted an international investigative journalism team, 2 Americans and a Belgian reporter specializing in war records. They met at a cafe near Grand Place, seated discreetly in a corner with stacks of documents spread across the table. Daniel laid out everything he had gathered: requisition slips from the disbanded Depot B-12, the map with the fuel transfer route, the photo of Collins by the GMC, Briggs's testimony, the logistics ledger with Route K-47, and finally, the threatening emails with metadata tracing back to a U.S. military server. The reporters took meticulous notes, their recorder running in secure mode. "This isn't just a missing person case anymore," one American reporter concluded. "It's a story about an internal network entrenched for decades." They began analyzing the GF signature on the requisition slips. Through access to another digitized quartermaster archive, the reporters found additional ledgers from late 1944 to early 1945. The GF initials appeared repeatedly in entries for fuel, ammo, and medical equipment allocations. These ledgers were stored in different depots, not all in the Ardennes, indicating GF wasn't a low-level local figure, but someone with broader authority, controlling distribution across multiple points. Daniel and the reporters mapped it out, from the fake Depot B-12 issuing slips to Route K-47 siphoning ammo from Bastogne to Collins being bound and led away by American soldiers, all tied to a single command figure, codenamed Gray Fox. They strategized publication. First, verify independently, then release through multiple channels simultaneously to avoid suppression. While contacting the U.S. Department of Defense to verify some ledger's authenticity, an unusual incident occurred. Sarah, the American reporter, was detained at Dulles Airport upon returning to Washington for interviews. Border agents said her name was on a secondary screening list, confiscating her phone and laptop for security checks. When Sarah asked why, they replied curtly, "Contact DOD regarding matters outside press jurisdiction." She was then denied entry and forced to return to Brussels on the next flight. The incident shocked the team. Never had an American reporter with a U.S. passport been blocked from entering their own country without clear explanation. It proved one thing: a force within the Department of Defense or related agencies was actively intervening to cut off leads before they surfaced. Thus, Gray Fox wasn't just a historical shadow. His network or its successors remained powerful enough to manipulate U.S. border procedures. Daniel sat with the reporters, slamming his hand on the table. "We have physical evidence, witness testimony, ledgers, and now a journalist unreasonably detained." It couldn't be clearer. The team agreed to accelerate the investigation. They divided tasks. The Belgian handled European records, while Sarah and the other American, alongside Daniel, focused on analyzing the GF signature, cross-referencing it with lists of logistics officers from the period. The group also began contacting major news outlets to prepare a simultaneous release. But Sarah's detention at the border was a wake-up call. Anyone involved risked surveillance and repercussions. They agreed to store document copies in multiple secure locations, share them with international lawyers, and set up an auto-release mechanism if anyone disappeared. In the Brussels winter darkness, Daniel's investigation had transcended a historical case. It became an information war, pitting truth-seekers against an invisible but powerful hand protecting Gray Fox's legacy. Sarah's border incident proved these forces weren't just relics of the past, they were active in the present. While the reporters split tasks, Daniel re-examined the decayed documents from the 2009 bunker. Some moldy pages, previously stuck together, hadn't been fully separated by Belgian technicians. With help from the University of Louvain's Document Preservation Lab, the pages were dried and flattened under glass. As text became legible, Daniel realized these weren't just requisition slips, but a pencil-drawn transport route diagram on graph paper. The diagram clearly marked 3 locations: Bastogne, Stavelot, Stoumont. A straight line connected them, with arrow symbols. Alongside were small notes. transit 22/12, 24/12, and a table of numbers. This wasn't an operational map, but a logistics route. The anomaly: it matched the corridor Kampfgruppe Piper traversed, where history records German panzers desperately sought fuel. A covert transport route ran through a high-risk zone, absent from any official military maps. What caught Daniel's attention most was a list of GMC truck numbers on the diagram's right column. Each had a chassis number, tank capacity, and driver's name. The faded numbers, when magnified with a loupe and UV light, revealed at least 7 trucks. One number stunned him: USA 4085273. It matched the number painted on the GMC in the photo with Collins, the photo found in his wallet in the bunker. This match was no coincidence. The December 20 photo showed Collins beside GMC 4085273. Now, the decayed document confirmed that truck was part of a secret convoy moving through Bastogne-Stavelot-Stumont during Collins' disappearance. This meant Collins wasn't just near the truck, he was at the heart of an off-the-books transport route, Daniel noted on a copy. GMC 4085273 appears in both the secret transport document and Collins' photo. The probability of a random match is near 0. The reporters, reviewing the photo and diagram, nodded in unison. They knew this was the strongest direct evidence proving Collins witnessed and possibly participated in an unauthorized convoy. The truck list revealed another oddity. Some were marked "no return," meaning they left the depot but weren't recorded as returning. In wartime, a few trucks being destroyed or abandoned was normal. But here, "no return" appeared repeatedly, forming an unusual pattern. It seemed these trucks were planned to disappear from the system from the start. Cross-referencing with the Route K47 ledger, Daniel found the diagram's dates matched the requisition slips for parallel route shipments. Once again, evidence from multiple sources aligned, forming a complete picture. Gray Fox operated a GMC convoy siphoning supplies from official depots, running through a secret Bastogne-Stavelot-Stumont route with legitimized paperwork in the ledger, and Collins, evidenced by the photo in his wallet, was there. This explained why he became a liability. His presence in the photo and on the truck list meant he saw the ghost convoy. If he reported it to higher command, the network would be exposed. The decayed document now solidified the truth Daniel and the reporters pursued. Edward Collins didn't go missing in an ambush but vanished after uncovering one of the darkest logistics secrets of the Allied effort in the Bulge. In the small Brussels room, Daniel placed the photo and truck diagram side by side. 2 pieces of evidence, 65 years apart, now formed a seamless thread, and all pointed to one name: Gray Fox, the figure who set up the fake depot, the parallel transport route, and the illicit network thriving in the heart of the war. Daniel knew the decayed documents and the photo of Collins by the GMC were solid evidence, but to complete the story, he needed more survivor accounts. Through the Veterans Association, he located John Mercer, 94, a former military police (MP) officer who served in Bastogne during the 1944 winter. Frail and living in a Liège nursing home, Mercer fell silent for a long moment when Daniel mentioned Edward Collins, then nodded slightly. "I know him, and I remember why I'll never forget." They sat in a small room, with Daniel placing restored document copies on the table. Mercer, trembling, lifted the photo of Collins by the GMC, his eyes misty. "Yes, that's him. I met Collins a day before he vanished." Mercer recounted that during the Ardennes chaos, MPs controlled roads, screened deserters, and verified transport papers. On December 21, Collins appeared at Mercer's checkpoint, covered in muddy snow, eyes anxious. He requested to meet the MP duty officer to submit an urgent report. Per Mercer, Collins said he'd discovered a GMC convoy transporting fuel not listed in official orders. Collins had the truck numbers, the Bastogne-Stavelot route, and stressed that the requisition slips were signed with GF initials. Mercer vividly recalled this because Collins insisted, "These are fake orders, and someone's funneling supplies out." Mercer wrote a preliminary report, scheduling Collins to return the next morning to meet the senior MP officer, but Collins never showed. On the night of December 22, Mercer heard vague reports of a young paratrooper being taken from a wooden depot. The next day, Edward Collins' name vanished from personnel lists, marked only as missing in action. Mercer asked about his report, but it was confiscated that night. From then on, all traces of it disappeared. Daniel listened intently, then showed Mercer the official military file for cross-reference. As the old man suspected, no MP reports mentioning Collins existed for December 1944. "You see," Mercer whispered, "even my report was erased. Someone wiped out every trace of Collins' warning. No papers, no evidence, like it never happened." This detail sharpened the picture. Collins hadn't stayed silent about the illicit transport. He followed protocol, reporting to the MP. But a day later, he was gone. So was the report, a system powerful enough to eliminate a witness and erase an MP file that was Gray Fox's network. Daniel asked Mercer why he hadn't spoken out for decades. The former MP stared out the window, his eyes clouded. "I tried once. After the war, I asked a buddy about it, and he warned me to stay quiet unless I wanted trouble. I stayed silent for 60 years because I knew the person behind it wasn't ordinary. But now, with you putting this photo in front of me, I believe it's time to tell." Daniel left the nursing home with a full recording and another living witness. Collins had officially reported the illicit transport route, but that report was erased from the records. This was no longer speculation but a deliberately hidden truth, and the thread led back once again to the same name, Gray Fox, the figure powerful enough to make a soldier and an official MP report vanish. In Daniel's hands were not just decayed documents, a photo, ledgers, or threatening emails. He now had the voice of a former MP confirming Collins spoke out before disappearing. This turned the case from a historical mystery into a living accusation, awaiting exposure to the public. News of the investigation began spreading beyond the small Brussels group as partner reporters in Washington caught wind. They sent formal requests to the U.S. Department of Defense, seeking explanations for the GF, signed ledgers, Route K-47, and the mysterious disappearance of Private Edward Collins. The Pentagon's response came quickly and coldly. No credible evidence supports the allegations. Discrepancies in World War II logistics records are common due to battlefield chaos. All other claims are baseless speculation. The reply was formulaic, neither confirming nor denying, only asserting that discrepancies were a natural consequence of war. Daniel read the statement in his rented Brussels room, placing it beside Collins' photo and Mercer's notes. The Pentagon's dry response only convinced the reporters something was being concealed. Sarah, the reporter detained at Dulles, fumed. "If it's just clerical error, why did Mercer's MP report vanish? Why was I denied entry? And why are we getting anonymous emails from military servers?" Amid the tense atmosphere, a strange envelope arrived at Daniel's hotel. The courier left no name, only the note. For Collins. Inside was a thin set of photocopied pages, yellowed, marked "Top Secret, Eyes Only," dated July 1946. The first page's title stood out, Joint Logistics Committee Minutes, Project Gray Fox. Below a red classified stamp, a brief passage read, "Assessment of irregular fuel transfers conducted in December 1944, Ardennes sector. Project Gray Fox remains restricted." Daniel froze. This was the first time he saw the name Gray Fox in an official U.S. document, not just a rumor or initialed signature. Moreover, the phrase irregular fuel transfers precisely matched the ledgers and decayed route diagram. The reporters huddled over each page. The document was heavily redacted, but key points remained. A list of GMC convoy codes running the Bastogne-Stavelot route, notes on certain units suspected of misreporting, and a conclusion. Recommendation: seal records, maintain Project Gray Fox as classified to avoid impact on troop morale and Allied relations. Sarah whispered. They knew in 1946. They had minutes, and they chose to bury it. The document's existence turned suspicion into documented reality. Collins hadn't imagined it, and Mercer hadn't misremembered. There was an official plan called Project Gray Fox, tied to secret transports amid the Ardennes firestorm. Daniel knew publishing these papers would ignite an explosion, but it also meant facing fiercer resistance from forces guarding this secret for over 6 decades. That night, in the small room, Daniel spread the leaked document beside other evidence. Collins' photo with GMC 4085273, the Route K-47 ledger, Briggs and Mercer's testimonies. Each piece, now anchored to a 1,946 classified U.S. document. The chain was complete. Collins uncovered the illicit transport route, reported to the MP, was detained and vanished. The report was erased, and a year and a half after the war, the Pentagon formed Project Gray Fox to investigate and seal it. The Pentagon's official claim of no evidence was contradicted by the leaked classified document. Evidence existed, minutes existed. They were just locked away. Daniel understood the case was no longer just a quest for justice for a missing soldier. It was a battle between historical truth and the thick walls of state secrecy enduring across generations. And for the first time, he held the key to that door, the door named Project Gray Fox. The 1,946 document mentioning Project Gray Fox convinced the team that other records must exist, sealed or scattered. Sarah and the Belgian reporter tried their luck in France, where many Allied archives were centralized post-war. They traveled to Paris, accessing the Military Archives Center in Vincennes. For weeks, posing as researchers of World War II logistics, they accessed non-sensitive file boxes. Most were routine inventories, but in basement level 3, in an old quartermaster command box, they found a thick, worn, leather-bound ledger labeled Auxiliary Depot, Paris Sector, Deck 1944. Opening it, the first page stunned them. In the approval column, the familiar pencil signature repeated, GF. Alongside some signatures was a red ink stamp, approved. The format matched the fake Depot B-12 slips Daniel had held. Sarah immediately photographed each page, sending encrypted scans to Daniel in Brussels. Daniel opened the files and compared them. The ledger detailed multiple shipments, transferred via Bastogne, routed through Stavelot-Stumont. The quantities were massive, thousands of gallons of fuel, tens of thousands of rounds. Next to each entry, the GF signatures stood like a seal of authority, with approved stamps showing these weren't low-level forgeries but high-level authorizations. The crux was the handwriting. Daniel enlisted a handwriting expert at the University of Leuven to compare the GF signatures in the Paris ledger with publicly archived U.S. logistics officers' records. After days of analysis, the result came a 92% match with the signature of Colonel George Fenton, a logistics officer in Patton's Third Army, responsible for coordinating depots in France, Belgium in late 1944. This discovery was a bombshell in the reporter's workspace. For so long, Gray Fox was a vague name, an unsigned initial. Now, they had a real identity, George Fenton, a senior logistics officer who managed the Third Army's vast supply chain. His rank gave him authority to approve documents, hide ghost shipments, and set up the fake Depot B-12. Sarah reported to Daniel, "We've connected the final dot. Gray Fox isn't a myth. He's real, with a rank, a record, and a Third Army patch." Daniel looked at Collins' photo on the table, clenching his fist. Every piece of evidence now pointed to one person. Collins saw the GMC convoys, reported to the MP, and vanished a day later. The Paris ledger with GF signatures and approved stamps showed this wasn't wartime chaos, but a network sanctioned from the top. With this identification, Daniel and the reporter's investigation took a decisive step, but they knew the danger would now escalate. If George Fenton's name went public, it wouldn't just expose Collins' death, but shake the system that protected Project Gray Fox for over 6 decades. The Paris ledger's GF signature, matching Colonel George Fenton's, opened the final door. From a vague name in documents, Gray Fox emerged clearly. A senior logistics officer in Patton's Third Army detached to France in late 1944 to coordinate supplies. Daniel and the reporters expanded their search to U.S. military personnel records, partially declassified in the 1,980 seconds. In the senior logistics officers list, George Fenton appeared in the right place. Colonel, Quartermaster Corps, assigned European Theater, Logistics Division, Noven 1944, Mar 1945. A note beside his name read, Temporary Detachment, Paris Sector. It matched the auxiliary ledger from Vincennes. Personnel records noted Fenton was discharged in 1946, returning to the U.S. But then the trail turned strange. Within 2 years, Fenton, a retired officer with a modest pension, became the owner of a private military supply company in New Jersey, Foxwell Supplies Incorporated. It quickly secured contracts to supply rations, fuel, and equipment to U.S. bases in Europe during the early Cold War. Revenue soared, making Fenton one of the wealthiest military suppliers, despite no prior business background. Daniel and the reporters noted each milestone. Late 1944, Fenton in Paris, signing secret ledgers. 1946, discharged. 1947-48, owning a supply company and amassing wealth. This couldn't be coincidence. Next, the team accessed post-war financial records. Through a Cold War economics expert, they found clues in partially declassified bank data. Fenton's 1,947 federal tax filings showed income far exceeding his pension and declared investments. Oddly, these filings included an IRS addendum noting foreign transfer income declared. Sarah dug into a lesser-known Library of Congress file, a 1,950 Senate Banking Committee report on post-war European money flows. In an appendix, Daniel and the team spotted a line that stunned them. Accountroute 775493, Swiss Bank Zurich, transfer to G. Fenton, New Jersey, Dec 1945. The transfer was $200,000, a massive sum then, equivalent to millions today. Transfers continued regularly from 1945 into the early 1962. This was the missing piece. Fenton, aka Gray Fox, didn't just run an illicit transport network in the Ardennes to siphon fuel and ammo. He turned war profits into personal wealth, laundering money through Swiss accounts and legitimizing it via his U.S. supply company. Tax records couldn't hide the truth. Fenton's wealth came from the illicit network he built in the Bulge's shadows. Examining Foxwell Supply's government contracts, a pattern emerged. Many were awarded without bidding, at double or triple market rates. Defense Department archives noted some contracts as contractor reliable prior service quartermaster. Fenton leveraged his logistics officer pass to secure trust and win bids. Daniel looked at the towering stack of documents. The evidence chain was seamless. Briggs saw Collins detained, Mercer confirmed Collins' MP report, the Paris ledger with GF's signature, and now post-war tax records proving Fenton received Swiss funds. All pointed to one conclusion: Gray Fox wasn't just a war profiteer. He built an empire from it, profiting illicitly from soldiers' deaths and Bastogne shortages. To the public, George Fenton was a successful veteran and businessman contributing to Cold War defense. But tax and transfer records exposed his true face. Gray Fox survived the war, became a millionaire, while Edward Collins was erased from history. His KIA record falsified, and his family received only a folded flag. At the reporters' internal meeting, no one doubted anymore. This wasn't a lone missing person case. It was the story of a senior officer who betrayed his duty, colluded with an illicit network to divert supplies, and laundered money through Switzerland. The first victim silenced was Private Edward Collins. Daniel felt the weight of the case. From a quest to recover his grandfather's artifacts, he had uncovered a network stretching from Ardennes in 1944 to post-war America. Gray Fox, the haunting codename, finally had a real identity: Colonel George Fenton, Quartermaster Corps officer. And the 1,945 financial evidence ended all debate. He had built wealth through betrayal. After post-war financial records showed George Fenton receiving funds from a Swiss account, the Gray Fox story was no longer a historical shadow but a clear indictment. As the journalists prepared to publish their series, Daniel received an unexpected call from the U.S. Embassy in Brussels. The voice on the line was low and firm. "Captain Collins, we need to meet immediately. It concerns classified documents in your possession. The meeting took place in a small room where an official in a suit, identifying himself as a Department of Defense representative, placed a thick file on the table, its red cover marked, "Unauthorized possession of classified records. Potential violation of U.S. Code." He spoke bluntly. "You've crossed a line. You have no authority to disclose what remains classified. We can charge you with compromising national security." Daniel stayed silent, staring at the papers. The official continued, lowering his voice. "But there's a way out for you." The man slid a draft agreement toward Daniel. It stated, "The U.S. Army would officially recognize Edward Collins as killed in action heroically, with his family receiving substantial financial compensation and a high-level funeral at Arlington. In return, Daniel and the journalists must hand over all related documents, end the investigation, and pledge not to go public." For a moment, the room was silent. This was what many MIA families dreamed of: recognition, honor, and compensation. But Daniel knew the cost. The truth would be buried again, and Gray Fox would escape. He picked up the agreement, flipping through it. At the final page, his eyes froze. On the paper, faint as a watermark, were the words, "Gray Fox Foundation." Daniel held the page to the light. Indeed, the text only appeared when tilted. Gray Fox Foundation. He looked straight at the official. "What is this foundation?" The man gave a slight smirk, retrieving the documents. "You don't need to know. What matters is, this offer ends your troubles and your family's." But for Daniel, the watermark was undeniable proof that the Gray Fox network persisted to this day, even with a financial organization named the Foundation. It wasn't just about 1,944 or post-war Swiss transfers. This was a structure, organized, powerful, and capable of intervening in an investigation from the heart of Europe. Back at the hotel, Daniel showed the watermark to the journalists. The room fell silent. Sarah's voice was sharp. "No government agency puts a watermark like that on an official agreement. This isn't a state document. It's the product of a private network with enough power to impersonate and manipulate. We're not just facing the past, but a living organization." What Daniel faced now far exceeded his expectations. Accepting the deal would give his family honor and compensation, but history would remain distorted. Refusing it risked prosecution, loss of citizenship, or worse. Yet the Gray Fox Foundation watermark confirmed one thing: the organization behind Edward Collins' death hadn't dissolved. It had evolved from a World War II covert network into a decades-long system of influence, capable of shielding and bribing. In his notebook, Daniel scribbled, "Gray Fox never disappeared, it evolved." That was why he couldn't sign the agreement. With that faint watermark, the document itself became new evidence proof that Collins' enemy wasn't just history but the present. After seeing the Gray Fox Foundation watermark on the draft agreement, Daniel knew there was no turning back. The organization hadn't just survived, it operated with sophisticated cover, crafting documents mimicking official U.S. government ones. He and the journalists decided to enter the final phase, publicizing the entire case. They codenamed the dossier the Ardennes Files. The compilation included Collins' photo with GMC 4085273, the Route K47 ledger, Depot B12 requisition slips, Briggs and Mercer's testimonies, the 1,946 classified Project Gray Fox document, the Paris ledger with GF signatures matching Colonel George Fenton, and the Swiss bank transfer tax records. Most crucially, the agreement with the Gray Fox Foundation watermark. All were scanned, encrypted, and sent to 5 major newsrooms across 3 continents: Washington Post, New York Times, Le Monde, Der Spiegel, and The Guardian. The strategy was clear. Simultaneous publication by 5 outlets would make suppression impossible. That night, using an anonymous Belgian server, they split the data into packets, secured with dual encryption, accompanied by an opening message. "This is the Ardennes Files. 65 years after the Battle of the Bulge, the truth about Depot B12, Project Gray Fox, and the death of Private Edward Collins must come to light." Within hours, newsrooms began confirming receipt. A Washington Post editor called Daniel directly. "We're verifying sources, but if what you sent is real, this is the biggest World War II leak ever known." The next morning, online headlines broke. Ardennes Files, the secret network in the Battle of the Bulge. Collins' photo, requisition slips, and GF signatures dominated front pages. Details of the fake depot, Route K47, and Swiss transfers were revealed. The public was stunned that a buried historical story connected directly to modern financial and political entities. But among the hundreds of document pages, one appendix went unnoticed by Daniel initially. When newsrooms analyzed metadata, they found a list naming 15 other U.S. soldiers missing in December 1944 around the Ardennes. Next to each name were brief notes: missing, nobody recovered, and in the last seen column, a recurring pattern, Depot B12. Veteran reporters spotted the pattern immediately. Collins wasn't alone. 15 other soldiers vanished in the same area, all linked to Depot B12, which was officially deactivated by November 1944. The question arose, did they share Collins' fate? As the Washington Post published this detail, public outcry erupted. Families recognized their loved ones' names on the list, speaking out. "We were told our sons died in ambushes, but now we know they may have been caught in a smuggling network." Newsroom hotlines rang non-stop, with dozens of families demanding reinvestigations. In New York, a Department of Defense spokesperson held a press conference, denying again, there is no credible evidence. These allegations rely on unverified documents and misinterpretations. But when a reporter held up a copy of the 1,946 Project Gray Fox minutes marked Top Secret Eyes Only, the room descended into chaos. This was no rumor, it was a documented record. Le Monde and Der Spiegel focused on the European angle. The Stavelot-Stumont transport routes, Kampfgruppe Paper's fuel hunt, and the looming question, was there a covert exchange between Allied and smuggling networks to keep operations running? The Guardian highlighted the Gray Fox Foundation watermark on the agreement, calling it proof the network persisted into the 21st century. Within 24 hours, Ardennes Files became a global headline. On social media, number Gray Fox trended fiercely. Historians were drawn into debates. U.S. lawmakers demanded hearings. CNN aired Collins' image, calling him the betrayed soldier. Daniel and the journalists no longer had to hide. They were now at the storm's center. More importantly, Daniel's original goal was realized. Edward Collins' death was no longer a cold MIA, presumed Kia note. It became a symbol of a hidden truth, showing Gray Fox not only profited personally, but caused tragedy for dozens of families. At a Brussels press conference, Daniel stood beside Sarah, his voice firm. The Ardennes Files isn't just about one soldier. It's about at least 15 other disappearances with the same pattern, all tied to Depot B12, all victims of the same network. As he paused, reporters fired questions. But for Daniel, the answer was clear. Collins didn't die alone. He was one of many caught in a wartime corruption vortex. And now, that secret could no longer be buried. After the Ardennes Files release and the revelation of 15 other missing soldiers, Daniel and the journalists dug deeper, reconstructing the night of the 22nd of December 1944, when witness Briggs claimed he saw Edward Collins bound and taken from the wooden depot by American soldiers. They pieced together all evidence: Briggs' testimony, Mercer's MP report, the decayed map with the Bastogne-Stavelot-Stumont route, and the ledger listing GMC Convoy 4085273, the truck in Collins' photo. Briggs said he saw Collins detained near midnight while his engineer unit rebuilt the depot. Mercer confirmed Collins reported the illicit convoy to the MP a day earlier. The ledger showed December 22 as the date. A large shipment was marked Route K47, no return. All converged. Collins was caught with evidence and eliminated at the wooden depot. The bunker found in 2009 was where the pieces fit. There, Collins' serial-numbered Thompson M1A1 and decayed requisition slips were buried under collapsed wood. This suggested that after his detention, his weapon and papers were seized, sealed with quartermaster paper, and hidden on-site away to erase traces. But an unexpected clue came from another source, a German soldier's diary, found in Freiburg's Bundesarchiv. Belonging to a corporal in an SS Panzer division near Stavelot, It noted on December 23, "We heard gunfire at night from the American position, but it didn't sound like a battle. Some in the platoon said the Americans shot one of their own." The words were simple but heavy. The German soldier didn't know Collins or have reason to distort. He only recorded an observation: gunfire at night, from the American side, with no German engagement. This was objective evidence confirming Collins was shot by his allies, not killed in a German ambush, as the official record claimed. Daniel placed the diary page beside Briggs and Mercer's accounts. 3 independent sources from a U.S. engineer, a U.S. MP, and a German corporal converged. Collins was detained, taken from the depot, and silently executed by those wearing the same uniform. The journalism team reconstructed the timeline. Afternoon, December 21. Collins submitted an MP report to Mercer, confirming a GMC convoy with fake requisition slips signed GF. Night, December 22, around 23:00. Briggs and his engineer unit saw Collins bound by American soldiers, with an officer ordering, "Gray Fox wants silence." After midnight, gunfire echoed from the depot area, heard and noted by a German soldier nearby in his diary. Dawn, December 23. Collins vanished from unit rosters, later recorded as MIA, presumed Kia. The artifacts in the wooden bunker Thompson and requisition slips were items Collins held before his capture. Left behind like relics, they testified to why he had to die. When the German soldier's diary was published as part of the supplemental Ardennes files, public outrage surged. No one debated how Collins died anymore. The evidence was too clear. He was eliminated by his own comrades to protect a fuel and ammo smuggling network. The stark truth, 65 years later, was finally reconstructed accurately. For Daniel, piecing together the night of December 22 wasn't just about clearing his grandfather's name. It was a reminder that betrayal came not from the enemy in front, but from shadows behind the flag Collins fought under. The bullets heard by the German soldier that night echoed back, becoming the final evidence exposing the truth. When the German corporal's diary confirming Collins was shot by American soldiers was added to the Ardennes files, public reaction exploded. Doubt was gone. Edward Collins didn't die in an ambush. He was executed by his own side to silence him. Public pressure spurred political action. The U.S. Congressional Committee on Military and Infrastructure called for emergency hearings. Daniel and the journalists presented hard evidence. The Paris ledger with GF, signatures matching Colonel George Fenton, the fake Depot B-12 ledger with route K-47, the decayed transport map found with the Thompson, and Fenton's post-war tax records. Notably, newsrooms published copies of Swiss bank transfers from December 1945, showing massive sums flowing to Fenton's personal account and into Foxwell Supplies Incorporated. Together, they formed an undeniable picture. Gray Fox was Fenton, who built a corrupt network in the heart of the Bulge. The Pentagon was forced to respond officially for the first time. A spokesperson stated, "We acknowledge the published documents and will cooperate with Congress to clarify." But internally, the military was shaken. Several logistics officers from the era were investigated. Public records showed at least 6 colonels and lieutenants who signed Depot B-12 slips were summoned. Some denied involvement, but others were found with unexplained wealth, post-war homes, and family businesses that surged unnaturally. In the first hearing, a congressman asked directly, "If Collins was eliminated to cover up smuggling, who gave the order?" Daniel presented a copy of the 1,946 minutes titled Project Gray Fox, noting irregular fuel transfers. He emphasized, "By 1,946, the Department of Defense knew and chose to seal the records. Collins' erasure from history was deliberate, not a clerical error." The room fell silent. The press dug deeper. Reporters discovered George Fenton died in 1970, officially from a traffic accident in Virginia. He was driving alone, lost control, hit an embankment, and the car burned. Police ruled it a simple accident. But when journalists retrieved the autopsy report, they found an overlooked detail. The car's brakes were disabled, though the official report omitted this. A retired firefighter recalled, "The fire spread too fast, like an accelerant was used. We'd seen many accidents, but that one wasn't normal." Daniel connected the final piece. Gray Fox didn't die naturally. He was eliminated to prevent exposure. The reason was clear. In the late 1960 seconds, Congress launched probes into defense contract corruption. Fenton likely knew too much and became a liability to the network that protected him. The news rattled the hearings. Some witnesses refused to testify, citing health. Others died suddenly while awaiting summons. International outlets ran features. From Bastogne to Virginia, the suspicious death of Gray Fox. At a Brussels press conference, Daniel stood with the journalists, displaying Fenton's death certificate alongside the technical report noting tampered brakes. He said, "Edward Collins was eliminated in 1944 for knowing the truth. 26 years later, Gray Fox himself was killed to silence him." This story never stopped. Public outrage in the U.S. and Europe surged. Families of the 15 other missing soldiers in the Ardennes files demanded their cases be reopened. The European Parliament joined, pressing the U.S. to explain Depot B-12's operations on Belgian soil. Within months, the Gray Fox network collapsed in the media. Though Fenton was dead, his name was struck from military honors, and Foxwell Supplies faced scrutiny over its assets. More importantly, the public realized Collins wasn't alone. His death, Daniel's grandfather's, became a symbol for a generation of soldiers betrayed by the system they served. When the truth was unveiled, Fenton's 1,970 death wasn't the end, but the final proof that the corrupt network endured long enough to purge itself. When the German corporal's diary confirming Collins was shot by American soldiers was published, the public erupted. Everything Daniel and the journalists had compiled was no longer theory. It became a system of evidence forcing the Pentagon into hearings. The Depot B-12 ledgers, Paris Depot notebook, Collins photo by GMC, 4085273, the decayed transport map, the 1,946 classified Project Gray Fox minutes, tax records, and Swiss accounts were all exposed. Each document was a piece, forming a panorama. Colonel George Fenton was Gray Fox, who set up a fake depot, created Route K-47, and siphoned fuel and ammo from the front for profit. The Congressional Committee forced the Department of Defense to face the public. A spokesperson said, "These records will be reviewed. We don't deny possible logistics failures." But behind the scenes, Ardennes, era officers were summoned. Some stayed silent, others denied, but the press uncovered several with unexplained wealth shortly after the war. When the Swiss bank transfers were exposed, outrage intensified. From late 1945, massive sums flowed to Fenton's personal account, then into Foxwell Supplies Incorporated, which became a major military supplier in the early Cold War. Clearly, Fenton became a millionaire through the network he built in the war. But digging deeper into Fenton's personal records, reporters found something extraordinary. He died in 1,970 inches, a traffic accident in Virginia. The official report said he lost control, hit an embankment, and the car burned. Police called it a simple accident, yet when the investigation team obtained the technical report, an overlooked detail emerged. The car's brakes were disabled before the crash. A retired firefighter recalled, "The fire burned too fast, like something was added. We'd seen many accidents, but not like that." The story shifted. Fenton, who ordered Collins' elimination, met a similar fate. His death wasn't accidental, but a hit to protect the network's secrets. In the late 1960 seconds, as Congress probed defense contract corruption, Fenton likely knew too much and was silenced by his own allies. This shook the hearings. Daniel presented Fenton's death certificate and technical report to Congress. Edward Collins was eliminated in 1944 to protect Gray Fox. 26 years later, Gray Fox was killed to protect the network. These aren't historical errors, they're a deliberate chain spanning decades. European and U.S. media ran headlines. From Bastogne to Virginia, Gray Fox's end. The public was stunned that the network not only existed during the war, but persisted for decades. Families of soldiers listed as missing in ambushes demanded case reopenings. Investigations widened. Foxwell Supplies faced audits over its capital. Financial records showed funds from secret accounts in Switzerland, Luxembourg, and Liechtenstein flowing into the company for years. Several ledger-named officers were tracked. Some died suddenly during summons, fueling belief the network hadn't fully dissolved. At an international Brussels press conference, Daniel presented the findings. The truth isn't just that Edward Collins was betrayed, it's that an entire network manipulated the war for personal gain, and it was strong enough to kill, then kill its own leader when he became a liability. Gray Fox was no longer a mystery. He had a name, a face, financial trails, and a brutal end. Fenton's image, once a logistics colonel, then a wealthy businessman, finally burned in a car, became a symbol of the shadowy empire's collapse. For Daniel, every document, copy, and witness pinned the truth. Edward Collins didn't die in vain. His death was the piece that unraveled Gray Fox's downfall after over half a century. When the truth about Gray Fox was exposed, public pressure forced the U.S. Department of Defense to take an unprecedented step, amending the official record of a soldier missing for over 6 decades. In a special statement, the Pentagon admitted, "Private Edward Collins, 101st Airborne Division, did not die due to unit separation as reported in 1944. He was a victim of an illicit logistics conspiracy, eliminated to conceal war crimes." Those blunt words aired on national television, ending over half a century of denial. A funeral at Arlington was scheduled, this time with full military honors. The flag-draped casket, a 21-gun salute, and a military band playing a somber tune marked the ceremony. The Collins family, once handed only a curt letter and a folded flag, now stood before a headstone bearing Edward Collins' name, the soldier once forgotten. Daniel, in dress uniform, received the flag from the Honor Guard commander. He gripped it tightly, his eyes shining, knowing he had fulfilled his promise to his grandfather. The ceremony included families of other soldiers listed in the Ardennes files. They held photos, brought flowers, and many wept as the list of 15 names, erased from history, was read aloud. All were now recognized as victims of the same conspiracy. A small monument was planned for Bastogne to commemorate them, a reminder that not all betrayals remain buried forever. But as the Collins family received the remains for the honorary casket, an unexpected discovery stunned Daniel. The old urn, sent to the U.S. in the late 1942, but never unsealed, was returned to the family. Among the relics, alongside charred fabric scraps, was a small metal tag, coated in faint green rust. When Daniel wiped it clean with a white cloth, engraved letters emerged, GF. No one knew how the tag got there. It wasn't Collins' dog tag, every identifying detail differed. A theory arose immediately. It could be a piece of metal Collins kept in his final hours, a piece of evidence, a message. GF Gray Fox. Historians debated. Did Collins secretly hide the tag in his belongings, hoping someone would find it one day? Or did his executioners leave it as a warning? Whatever the answer, the detail added weight to the story. It was the final symbol, a tangible artifact encapsulating the tragedy. An American soldier betrayed by the system he served. At the funeral, as the casket was lowered, Daniel tucked the metal tag into a small box beside it, linking his grandfather's fate to the last evidence he left behind. GF was no longer the mark of a perpetrator, but proof that Edward Collins fought until his final breath to protect the truth. As the notes of taps echoed, a profound silence enveloped Arlington Cemetery. For the first time in 65 years, Edward Collins was no longer just an MIA line in a file. He was honored as a victim of conspiracy and a symbol of courage. His story transcended his family. It became part of official history, a warning of the shadows behind war. For Daniel, gazing at the rows of white headstones, he knew the journey wasn't over. But today, his grandfather had been given back his truth, and the folded American flag in his hands was no longer a symbol of deceit, but of hard-won justice. The Arlington event closed, but its echoes persisted. Within days of the funeral, major outlets from the Washington Post, New York Times, to Der Spiegel and Le Monde ran headlines. The Ardennes Conspiracy, a 65-year cover-up. Editorials called Edward Collins' death a symbol of a dark chapter in U.S. military history, where corruption and smuggling infiltrated the most critical moment of World War II. The American public was incensed. Congress swiftly launched hearings, officially titled Hearings on Wartime Logistics Irregularities, European Theater 1944. Hundreds of documents were brought to light, from Depot B 12 ledgers, fuel slips, to the 1,946 classified minutes. Former logistics officers were questioned directly. One senator declared sharply, "We're not just looking at the past, we're looking at a flaw that allowed a corrupt network to survive and manipulate for decades." Daniel Collins became the key witness, sitting before the committee with a complete dossier. He wasn't a historian or politician, just the grandson of a betrayed soldier, but his testimony silenced the room. He read the German soldier's diary, presented the GF metal tag from the old urn, and concluded, "This isn't just Edward Collins' story. It's the story of a system that treated soldiers' lives as expendable for profit." The press dubbed Daniel the heir to Collins's unfinished mission. He rejected any titles, agreeing only to continue working with the international journalism team to expand the investigation. From Brussels to Paris to Washington, he collaborated with reporters determined to uncover remaining links. Names once shielded by code names emerged: logistics officers, military contractors, even civilian officials tied to the scheme. While public focus centered on the main story, Daniel quietly tracked a newly declassified National Archives file. Within it, a shocking list appeared. Beyond Edward Collins, 14 other U.S. soldiers were recorded as killed around Depot B-12, all with a pattern: missing without remains, death reports backdated, and families receiving only a flag and a standard letter. These names were barely mentioned in historical studies. When Daniel shared the list with the journalists, the meeting room fell silent. History's curtain parted further. Collins wasn't an outlier, he was one of many victims. 14 other soldiers likely shared his fate, caught in the smuggling vortex and eliminated to protect the fake Depot and Gray Fox's network. CBS Evening News reported, "The Ardennes conspiracy is far from over." Newly declassified records show Edward Collins had at least 14 comrades vanish in Depot B-12 shadows. The anchor concluded, "If true, we're facing one of the largest collective betrayals in U.S. military history." With this discovery, Congress expanded the hearing's scope. The families of those 14 soldiers, for the first time in 65 years, were invited, clutching yellowed letters. Many wept as Daniel said, "We won't let them disappear again in the records. They deserve the truth," as Edward Collins did. In Europe, Belgian historians proposed a memorial plaque in the Ardennes Forest, where the decayed bunker was found. It would bear not only Collins' name, but those of the 14 others, victims of betrayal in the shadows. The idea gained widespread support. Bastogne locals said, "We thought only the Germans caused suffering. Now we know the truth is more complex." But regardless, those soldiers were victims and must be remembered. In a year-end interview, Daniel was asked where he'd stop. He answered firmly, "I won't stop. Edward Collins paved the way. 14 others are waiting. And there may be more, in the Pacific, in Italy, where records remain sealed. This work will take time, but I'll continue until every shadow is exposed." Edward Collins' story transcended borders. It was no longer just a military case, but a global symbol of independent investigation's power and the courage to confront the past. The Ardennes conspiracy entered textbooks as a lesson on the need for oversight of military and wartime logistics contracts. At the Bastogne Memorial's dedication, a light rain fell under a cloudy sky. Daniel and the families of the 14 soldiers stood before a black granite stone inscribed, "They fought for freedom, but were betrayed within. We remember." Bells echoed through the Ardennes Forest that once swallowed them. But now, the silence was broken. In Daniel's mind, the journey wasn't over. The new dossier was just the start of another investigation chain. Like his grandfather, he knew some truths take a lifetime or generations to bring to light, but once found, they become an eternal legacy. Edward Collins had been given justice. But his legacy wasn't just in stone or Arlington's funeral. It was the fire driving his descendant and a new generation to keep digging, questioning, and demanding answers. In the final pages of the Ardennes files, Daniel wrote, This file doesn't close. It opens a new case. Depot B12 wasn't just where Edward Collins fell, but the starting point for 14 untold stories. As night fell over Arlington and Bastogne, the white headstones stood, silent but no longer forgotten. Collins' legacy proved that truth, however long buried, finds its way back. From the 1,944 Ardennes shadows, the echoes of missing soldiers reminded humanity of a simple truth: no sacrifice deserves betrayal. Edward Collins' story wasn't just a Bulge soldier's tragedy, but a quintessentially American reminder of civic duty. When the system fails, ordinary people can and must fix it with truth, disciplined evidence, and social alliance. Daniel achieved justice not through emotional outcry, but through cold verification. From the serial-numbered Thompson, the Bastogne-Stavelot-Stumont map, GF signatures on ledgers, Route K47, to the military server email metadata, and Gray Fox Foundation, watermark on the agreement. The lesson for America today, amid debates on defense contracts, supply chains, and misinformation is, don't equate patriotism with silence. Patriotism demands placing truth above superficial honor. If you work in the public or private sector, learn from Daniel in 3 ways. 1. Preserve records and spread risk. Daniel sent the Ardennes files to 5 newsrooms simultaneously. 2. Cross-verify Briggs' testimony, Mercer's MP report, and the German diaries. We heard gunfire among the Americans themselves. Debunk the wartime error excuse. 3. Separate rewards and punishments from cover-ups. Daniel rejected honor plus compensation when the cost was burying the truth. For veterans' families, the lesson is preserve papers, photos, metal tags like the GF piece. Small items can unravel big cases. For voters, support whistleblower protection laws, independent audit budgets, and FOIA access. Demand contract transparency, as yesterday's Depot B12 could be today's rigged bidding. For individuals, learn cybersecurity after Daniel's laptop malware, 2-factor authentication, offline backups, and conditional evidence sharing. Arlington reminds us, honor isn't enough without truth. Justice endures only when communities persist, the press is free, and citizens dare say no to deals trading silence for safety. If you want to follow more buried history like the Ardennes Conspiracy, subscribe to stay updated on new discoveries. Thank you for joining us, and see you in the next video, uncovering more wartime secrets waiting to be brought to light.